The NC State game showed us a lot about the Clemson Tigers, but perhaps the most important takeaway from this game is that this year is the year of aggressiveness.
You are Locked On Clemson, your daily podcast on the Clemson Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Clemson podcast for our Game 3 post-game show. I'm your host, John Bivens. You can follow us over on Twitter at @IamJohnBivens. Thanks for making Locked On Clemson your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast at and over on YouTube. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. After you listen to this podcast, make sure you go check out one of the other 200-plus podcasts with the Locked On Podcast Network. Here on Locked On Clemson, though, you're getting all sports, all passion, all the time, where we're bringing you everything you need to know regarding Clemson sports. Today is September 21st. We just watched Clemson dominate the Wolfpack in the Playstyle poll. We're going to talk about some great stuff, talking about the year of aggressiveness, proficiency from Cade Klubnik, and then how ABC needs to step it up a little bit better with that broadcast. But we are grateful for all of our sponsors that make this show possible. For a full list of our sponsors, go check out them in the episode notes. The NC State game, the game that we just watched, literally the game ended 4 minutes ago. As this game ended, this game showed us a lot of stuff about Clemson, showed us a lot of great things, but perhaps the biggest thing is just how aggressive this team is. Well, this game that Clemson just had and the victory we just had over NC State, fun fact, the score doesn't show the victory. If you didn't watch the game, 59-35 was not the final score. Like it was, that was technically the final score. That doesn't reflect this game. Our starting defense gave up 7 points. They held them to 14 till late. It wasn't until the fourth quarter when NC State really started scoring. And when they were scoring, we were having like our third string quarterback wasn't moving the ball. Trent Pierman didn't move well. Our fourth string quarterback even got in the game with Paul Tyson. Our offense wasn't moving. And so NC State had the ball a drastic amount, which is why they put up 21 points in the fourth quarter. So even count the third quarter with backup offense, backup defense in, we won this game 59-14 was the score in the third quarter. That's the game. Take away the fourth quarter because it was garbage time. It doesn't matter. This game we just watched with NC State was a complete domination. And then honestly, we hit a lot of milestones, right? We hit a lot of milestones with this game. Two big ones. The first one, with this win, Clemson is now the 14th school in the nation, the first in the ACC to have 800 wins as a program in football. Give it up for them. Ooh, yep. But it also was a big one because it kept the home streak alive. NC State is still yet to beat the Tigers at home and since 2002. So 22 years of domination at home against the Wolfpack. But this game was electric. From the first snap, NC State won the coin toss, was like, hey, we'll defer so we get a better chance in the second half. We got the ball. Cade Klubnik had a 55-yard touchdown run. First possession, we had a huge, massive, explosive play. This team, take away the Georgia game because I'm marking that up as a fluke. For sure, Georgia's better than us. We said that. They're not that much better as what that game played. It was a fluke. It was first game of the season. But this season, we've seen explosiveness and we've seen aggressive at all aspects. Let's focus on aggressive for today. This week, we'll talk about explosiveness. But for right now, let's talk about aggressiveness from coaching. Last week, you saw going for fourth down when we didn't need to. You saw Dabo throw the challenge flag when we're up huge just to let his guys win by even more. And it was a successful challenge flag. This week, we saw some more of that. For instance, when we're up by 35 and it's 4th and goal on the 7-yard line, instead of kicking a field goal to go up by 40 or go up by 38, you know what Dabo does? Dabo goes for it and we score a touchdown to go up by 42. That's the aggressiveness, right? At the end of the first half, NC State has the ball. We just score. NC State has the ball with a little bit over a minute left. They run the ball trying to run out the clock to end the half. You know what Dabo does? He says, nope, not too easy. Calls a timeout. So what do? He forces them to be able to try to make plays. He's like, if you're not going to make plays, we will take the great field position and score before the end of the half. And that's exactly what happened. We ended up kicking a field goal as time expired to add more points. So he's using timeouts when we're up huge, right? We're up by 35 at the end of the first half. And instead of us being able to go in at halftime with this 35-point lead, Dad was like, that's not enough. If you're going to make it easy for us, we'll take it. So we went in at halftime with a 38-point lead. That's the aggression. That is what this season is. And I hope that level, and I really think that level of aggression is going to continue out through the entire season. Do I think we're going to have every single game having like it did today? I mean, possibly. I mean, with our offensive plan under Cade Klubnik, we'll get into that, but there's a possibility. But no matter what the games are looking like, I'm really hoping that aggression from the coaching, from Dabo Swinney, is going to stay there, because that's what we need. In order for us to continue this rise back to where we were, we need that aggression. But our defense played aggressively. I mean, our defense was aggressive. We forced 2 big turnovers in the first half. One was on CJ Bailey, had a blind side, get smoked. Just completely got lit up. Forced the fumble. We recovered it. Had great spot. We got great field position. Ended up scoring, going up 21-0. The very soon after that, I think either the next possession or the one after that, Avian Terrell stripped Concepcion as he made a catch, was running up the sideline trying to get the first down. Avian Terrell stripped him, picked up the ball and started running. He stepped out of bounds right away, but stripped him, and we got the ball back on like the 35-yard line, 38-yard line. Our defense was seeking out those turnovers. There was another interception later on in the game. I think when all comes down, when you looked at their box score, when you look at the stats from NC State, CJ Bailey had a decent game. Like, he didn't have a terrible game. He went 16 for 25, 204 yards. That's your first start against a really good program. That's good yards, but 1 touchdown, 1 interception. We held them great. In the first half, we held them to very little rushing yards in the first half. I mean, in the first quarter, I think they had 20 yards rushing. It was insane. Receiving, we shut down Kevin Concepcion, the best wide receiver on the field, with talent-wise, had 5 receptions for 40 yards. He really didn't do much, didn't put up a score at all. We only allowed 1 passing touchdown from CJ Bailey, another one from Letts Thomas in the fourth quarter with like 5 seconds left on the game. But our defense played aggressive. They showed up and they shut them down. They shut up and was like, you keep doing that, you're going to keep trying to play this, and we're not going to allow it to happen. They played aggressively. This team is an aggressive team, and that's what we need to see. Our starters, like we said, our starters only allowed 7 points in this game. We already talked about our starters only allowed 7 points. Really, because at the beginning of the second half, our starters did in for a little bit, and they were in for that first possession. NC State didn't score on that first possession. They came in and they lost the ball, right? They gave it up incomplete down on 4th and 2nd, and it caused the turnover on downs. Our starting defense gave up 7 points. And they let CJ Bailey get a little too comfortable in the pocket. They made some mistakes. They missed a couple open tackles, but I will take 7 points all day long, without a doubt. This defense is playing aggressive. This offense is playing aggressive. And I love to see it. You should love to see it. But let's talk more about the offensive aggressiveness, because they were perhaps more aggressive than the defense was. Passion, drive, and patience. That's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're doing this. You're burning rubber. You're not burning cash. With all the parts you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. That is ebaymotors.com. Cade Klubnik has been the most proficient quarterback in the nation in the past 2 weeks. Don't believe me? Think I'm overreacting a little bit? Maybe. We do that on the postgame show. But let's write this down. Past 2 weeks, he's really only played in the first half of both games, barring one other possession today, the first possession of the second half. Here's what he's done. He's had 17 drives. 17 drives he's had that. In those 17 drives, he's had 15 touchdowns. Not all were passing, not all were him touchdowns, but he's led the team on 15 touchdown drives out of those 17. We had one field goal, and I firmly believe the only reason it was a field goal is because the half was expiring, and they had to try to pass it to save time on the clock for a field goal kicker to get in and have time to kick a field goal. So I think that would have been a touchdown if we weren't fighting against the clock. And then we had one punt. There was one drive today that led to a punt. Little disappointing there. It was 3 plays for 3 yards for lasted a minute 20 seconds. Right, it was early on in the second quarter. Cade Klubnik had a complete pass for a loss to Bryant Wesco. Phil Maffa ran it, and then Troy Stellato didn't have a completion there. So a little disappointing there. Yeah, for sure, having that one punt, but I think we'll settle. I think we'll be all right. I think we won't be too upset at 17 drives. 16 of those walking off with points, 15 of them with touchdowns. That's proficiency. You know what that stems from? That stems from aggressiveness. We've talked about the defense. We talked about coaching being aggressive. This year, our offense is being even more aggressive. Prime example is today. In this game, early on in the second quarter, our Cade Klubnik dropped back and threw a pass to Antonio Williams, who was sprinting down the field, had his receiver beat by a good 3 yards. Unfortunately, the ball was a little underthrown, and so Antonio Williams had to slow down a little bit, allowing the receiver or the defender to catch back up. He still should have caught it, went straight through his hands, literally fell through the basket, right between his legs at the waistline, fell, incomplete pass. It's on Cade for not putting it out there, let him continue in stride, but it's also Antonio Williams. Go watch the replay. I'm not just being overcritical. He easily should have had that ball. It should have been an easier ball for him if Cade would have underthrown a little bit, maybe a little late getting it to him. So there is a little blame on Cade, but Antonio Williams should have had that call. No, I had that ball. Either way, could have been a very explosive play for a big touchdown, but it wasn't. It was an incomplete pass. The very next play, I don't mean the same possession. I mean the very next play, Cade Klubnik drops down, does like a 3-step, 4-step drop, maybe a 5-step. And as soon as he does, he lets it go. And TJ Moore is already at 40 yards down the field. TJ Moore catches on the sideline for this huge gain. Cade was like, all right, yeah. You think you prevented that incomplete? You caused it incomplete? Sure, that stinks. Watch this. And just did the exact same thing just on the sideline to a different player. It was great to see. That's the aggression we're seeing. Last year, our biggest complaint when it came to Cade Klubnik, our biggest complaint when it came to this offense was safety. Our biggest thing that we saw that was like, what is going on, is we saw this team not continue to be aggressive. We saw safe playmaking. We saw this opportunity where they weren't striving to score. They weren't striving to make the big plays. They were going out and they were trying to do the safe thing. They were trying to go out and play really safe, not throwing balls down the field, not going for big plays. They were doing halfback drives and wide receiver screens and all these small things that we know isn't going to work. This year, we haven't seen that. We did against Georgia, but again, fluke. We're not talking about that. This year, what we've seen is an aggressive team. They are opening the playbook, and I firmly believe this. We'll talk about this more this week. We're seeing Garrett Riley's playbook. This isn't Dabo Swinney's. This is Garrett Riley's playbook. We are seeing him completely come through. It looks a lot like TCU did in 2022. We're seeing his style come through, and it's allowing Cade Klubnik to play like a playmaker. He's not playing like a game manager, which we talked about in the past. He's not playing like that. He's playing like a true playmaker, allowing him to use his talent and his skills to find the playmakers on the wide receivers and the running backs to be able to have playmakers as well. This team is aggressive. It's explosive, and it's great to see. In order for you to see that, all you have to do is look at the box score. Like we said last week, Cade Klubnik blew up the stats. In the first half, 24 for 26, only incompletions were thrown away, almost 400 yards, 5 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns. He didn't have that same game today, but he still had an amazing game. He played 1 possession in the second half. The rest, he was all in the first. He went 16 for 24. 209 yards, 3 touchdowns. And on the ground, he also had 4 carries for 70 yards and a touchdown, with one of those being a 55-yard touchdown run on the first possession of the game. He is playing aggressive. He is coming out and just throwing the ball letting himself, I think he's more comfortable. He's looking more natural. He's less trying to overcomplicate things. He's sitting there, he makes his reads and he's quick with it. Whatever decision he makes, he's confident with it. He's not second guessing himself. Last year, we saw a lot of him go through his progressions. He'd look at progression 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and then he'd fire back to 1. It was like he was taking in everything and then making a decision. That's not what you need at quarterback. What you need at quarterback is you need to go through, look for a progression. When somebody's open, you let it go. You let it rip. And that's what he's doing. He's making the right fit plays. He's being confident in the pocket. He's being comfortable in the pocket. He's doing what he needs to do for this team to have success. And he is playing amazingly. But that wasn't just where our stats came from. That wasn't just where the aggressiveness came from. Phil Maffa, 7 carries today. Not a lot of carries. He had an injury, got tripped up on a tackle, landed hard on his shoulder. He only missed 1 possession, so he came back. He was healthy. 7 carries, 107 yards for 1 touchdown. Earlier this week, we put an over-under at 75 yards. Yeah, he beat that. 7 carries for 107 yards. 1 touchdown, had a 38-yard run at one point. Our backup, Jay Haynes, looked good. Honestly, some people I saw on Clemson Twitter were pretty upset with him, saying that he didn't look great. I thought he looked great. He had 8 carries for 42 yards and a touchdown. Love to see that. Cole Turner had a rush as well. Not a typical rush, not a handoff, but he had 1 rush for 18 yards and a touchdown. We had 4 rushing touchdowns today. That's what we need to see more of. We need to see more of the rushing touchdowns. We talked about it yesterday or Thursday on the crossover episode with Locked On Wolfpack. The trenches were important in this game. In order for Clemson to win, the offensive line had to be there. Defensive line had to cause pressure. And our trenches won all day long. They put the pressure. They allowed the holes. They allowed time in the pocket. And that led to great rushing. We rushed for 269 yards as a team. 269 rush yards, and then we paired that with 260 pass yards. We played excellent. Couldn't be more happy. Couldn't be happier with the aggressiveness that came out. And our receivers played well as well. You can't talk about this team without our amazing receiving core that, honestly, there was a lot of doubts. We had doubts of up until last week. So our receiving core did great. We're going to talk about more about our wide receivers in just a minute.
Jarvis Davis here for FanDuel. You heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So guess what? I'm about to tell you a little bit more. We got a little something just for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. It doesn't matter if you're a fan of the Atlanta Falcons, the Carolina Panthers, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Las Vegas Raiders. It doesn't matter, because guess what? With a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. Yes, every regular season out-of-market game. That is so dope. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. And make sure you download America's #1 sportsbook.
Not only was our offensive game style aggressive, not only was our defense aggressive, not only was coaching aggressive, our receivers were aggressive in this as well. Adam Randall had a great game. I know he played a lot more than some of our rookies, just based on they allow him to play a little bit more in the garbage time than they do other people. But Adam Randall played well. He had 5 receptions for 69 yards and a touchdown. Antonio Williams had 2 touchdowns on the day on 3 receptions for 39 yards. We had other people get involved. TJ Moore had that 1 catch for 40 yards down the sideline that we talked about. Bryant Wesco had a disappointing day. He was one that we talked about with Locked On Wolfpack. He was the one I really thought would have another great game after that App State one last week. He had 1 catch for -1 yards on it was pretty much a wide receiver screen, which if you know me, you know I'm not a fan of that call. But either way, he had -1 yards on 1 catch. So a little disappointing in that. Overall, we had a lot of wide receivers get involved. We had a total of 10 wide receivers have a catch, at least 1. You had Josh Sapp, Jackson Crosby, Phil Moffitt caught 1, Jay Haynes, Drake Brenningstool. Troy Stellato played a lot in this game. And honestly, Troy Stellato, I'm not a fan of. There was one thing that happened today that we're going to talk about later this week, just about Troy's vibe, about what he did, about how he handles himself on the field. I got mixed feelings on him. So make sure you tune in this week as we dive into a deep core of our receivers. And we talk a little bit more about Troy Stellato. But before we end today, I want to talk about one more thing, and I just want to talk about the first quarter, because that's really a mark. That's the aggression that comes out the start of game is really how you progress throughout the season. For instance, the first quarter against Georgia, no one did anything. Georgia didn't score, which they came on the second half, but Clemson didn't score. Offense looked terrible. First quarter against App State, they were never in the game. We came out hot. First quarter today, the exact same thing. With the NC State never had a chance to get in this game. Here's the first quarter stats. First quarter stats, Cade Klubnik went 7 for 8 with 77 yards and 2 touchdowns. His only incompletion was an incomplete pass that Bryant Wesco should have caught. He dropped it coming in, got hit. He should have caught it, but he didn't. Rushing the ball, we had 145 rush yards. Phil Maffa had 87, Cade Klubnik had 55, and Jay Haynes had 3. Receiving, that's where Antonio Williams, he only caught a ball in the first quarter. He didn't catch another one after. He had 3 receptions for 39 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jake Brennings, who got involved with a catch for 18 yards. Troy Stellato made a catch for 13 yards. Phil Maffa had 2 for 7. Our offense came out hot. But as we talked about, not only did we score a lot, we scored 28 points in the first half, we also kept them to 0. Their quarterback, CJ Bailey, I'll be honest, if I'm an NC State fan, there's no way I would ever want Grayson McCall to start a game. As good as CJ Bailey looked today, as a true freshman in his first start, I want him to get as much experience as possible. They're not having a great season so far. Let him just carry you through. I know you spent money on Grayson McCall. I know you brought him in as a transfer. You expected him to be the savior of the program. I'm rocking with CJ Bailey. He started 6 for 6 for 90 yards, ended with over 200 yards, only had 1 interception, and it was late in the game. I'm letting him go with it. He played well. He didn't have a lot of mistakes, especially early on. But talking about this first quarter, as we're talking about rushing yards, we gave up 4 rushing yards in the first quarter. 4. We gave up 18 to Jordan Waters, and then we held CJ Bailey to -14. Some of that was sacks, but a couple of those are just quarterback reads or a little QB read, and he kept the ball, and he shouldn't have and got tackled way behind the line. Receiving the ball, obviously, we let them have 6 receptions for 90 yards with CJ Bailey stats. But my point is this. We're playing aggressive, and we're keeping it aggressive. Like, we're starting out hot, which allows us to have that time in the second half where our defense can come in and get our bench players, our depth can come in and get experience, because you never know when they're going to need it, barring injuries, right? They are playing aggressive, and it is making a difference. We said this one, but as we'll talk about it again, first quarters all last year, the first quarters of every game last year, Clemson scored 74 points. I believe that was the case, 74 points last year. The first quarter in this year, and the first quarters this year, what we scored now after 3 games is 63 points. That's the difference. That's what's really defining this team. We're starting hot. We're getting the ball and we're scoring. We've scored every possession we had the ball in the first quarter, both of the past 2 games. We've scored every possession in the first quarters. That's what this team needs. We need to get out. We need to show our aggressiveness. We need to show our play calling. We need to show what the teams can see. And if we could take that early lead, no one's going to catch up to us with this explosive of an offense. Here's my overreaction of the day. If you watch our post-game shows, you know on these post-game shows, we allow ourselves to be a little bit more free. It's less notes, and it's more of just what we're feeling, what we saw in the game, our initial reactions without all the filters. Our overreaction is this, and I don't even know if this is overreaction. I'll let you tell me. Drop a comment if you think I'm overreacting. I think there's a very high chance that in our ACC schedule this year, that Clemson, Cade Klubnik and our starting offense, our main starters, play in less of the second half than they play in the second half. I'm going to say that a different way because that was a little confusing. I think Cade Klubnik is going to sit more in the second half of the rest of the season during regular season than he'll actually play in the second half. Last week didn't play at all. This week played 1 possession. I think we're going to see more and more and more of that. I think some games we'll see him play maybe in the 3rd, but not play in the 4th. He's going to sit a lot. This game, it's going to be a huge difference because We're going to score quick. We've showed we have the offensive explosiveness and the defense strength to be able to score quick and not allow them to score at all. Next week, Stanford comes into Clemson and plays. I think that could be a game that turns out like today. It could also be a challenge. We go to Florida State, who 0-3 start, possibly 0-4. We'll see what happens today. You probably, maybe if you're watching, you've already seen it, but maybe 0-4. Play Wake Forest, which will be a good game. Wake Forest. Yeah, that's all I'll say. But then Virginia comes into the home, so that one could be another situation. Our hardest game of the season in regular season, I think, is Louisville. I think Louisville's got a lot of good stuff going on, so I think he'll play the full game there. But then we go to Virginia Tech, who has a hard environment, but they're not known for having the best stuff. Like, they have a hard environment there, but this year, not playing too hot. And then we go to Pittsburgh, which I think is going to be our second hardest game of the season. Host the Citadel, and then in the season hosting South Carolina, which I think will be our third hardest game of the regular season with their defense. But either way, our overtake of the day, I think our team is going to be so great. Our offense is going to be so talented. Our defense is going to be so stingy with the ball that I think throughout the rest of this season, Cade Klubnik will sit more in the second half than he'll play in the first half. Then he'll play in the second half. That's how dominant this team is, and it stems from aggressiveness. Last thing we want to talk about, I don't know if y'all watched the game on ESPN app or on ABC, but let me tell you, I was disappointed. I want to just this is mainly just because I got to get this off my chest. So if you don't want to hear me rant about poor broadcasting, you can go ahead and end the episode now. But, man, ABC was terrible. Perhaps the biggest thing that set me off and really started to let me notice all the bad things was there was a play earlier on in the game where C.J. Bailey tried to throw the ball, but he pulled it down because defensive line got to him and like 3 players tackled him. After they got up, players are pushing, right? There was a big dog pile on top of C.J. Bailey, quarterback for Wolfpack. Players are pushing after they got up, and an NC State offensive lineman completely spits on one of our Clemson players. I just mean and then spits all over offensive lineman or one of our defensive linemen. He gets immediately ejected from the game, as he should. That's a part of it. Well, as they're talking, Molly McGrath, who was a sideline reporter, comes on and says, "Hey, I just had a clear view of this play. I saw everything. I saw a bright orange cleat stomp intentionally on the head of of C.J. Bailey, the quarterback for NC State." I'm like, what? I missed that. I didn't see that at all. They show the replay. No. Didn't happen at all. One of our defensive linemen stood up and put his foot out to like pick himself off of the ground. Might have been a little incidental contact, but his foot maybe touched the back of his helmet. Was nowhere near a stomp on the helmet like she made it out to be. I mean, just flat out wrong. It was to the point where if you watch a lot of sports, usually broadcasters will never correct a sideline reporter. They try not to call each other out when they mistake. Both the broadcasters like, yeah, what Molly said, gratefully that wasn't true. That didn't happen. The NC State player, one of his offensive linemen accidentally stepped on his head, but no Clemson player did. So I just mean a flat out not true statement. And I get people are like, oh, she's on the sideline. She can't see that well. She might have thought that happened. Fair. Don't make that big of an accusation and say the refs didn't see it. That's what she said. She said the refs didn't see it, but I did. So he shouldn't be the only one getting a penalty, getting thrown out of the game. Whoever stomped on C.J. Bailey's head should too. Don't make that accusation when you can't prove it, and then you're proven wrong. Watch a replay before you say something like that. You're on the sideline. I get you have a great view from the sideline. You're also 25 yards away from them from on the sideline because even if you're out on the sideline, they're playing in the middle of the field. This was in the pocket, right in the middle of the field. You can't see that. Don't make that kind of accusation when you can't see anything. That's poor broadcasting. That's terrible. But there was more than that too with ABC. The score tag at the bottom, the colors were blending in with the grass in the background, and they were messing up. There was a couple times the camera would just go out and go black. There was a couple times where the overall the colors of the jerseys and the fans and the overall colors of the field were just washed out, and it didn't look great. Didn't have the best camera quality. But perhaps the worst thing, other than the poor sideline reporting, was randomly throughout majority of the game, a graphic would pop up, and then you would just hear this beep, beep, beep. It was just this constant whistling, beeping noises. What in the world? This isn't like some secondary level sketchy stream we're watching. I'm watching live national TV on ABC, and we can't get to a point where there's not a whistling going off nonstop in the ear. I know some people will be like, oh, they make mistakes, no one's perfect. Yeah, they're ABC. They shouldn't be having that kind of problems. And I know when it comes to college sports, a lot of times the home team is responsible for the broadcasting, but that would be the camera quality. So you can blame the colors. If you want to blame something on Clemson, you might be able to blame the colors for not being as pop. But last week against App State, or 2 weeks ago against App State, it was nothing like that on the camera. So very different. They're poor. I'm bringing all that up just to kind of rant it off, but ABC's got to be better than that. I'm interested to see, once I record this, put this episode out, I'm going to go watch a LSU game that is on ABC right now, and I'm just curious to see if they have any of the similar problems or not, but it was rough, hard to see. But overall, we got to bring in a little negative, right? Thanks for listening to my rant. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. But to end the episode, I just want to repeat, this team is dominant. This game today shows how dominant Clemson can be. Coaching, defense, offense, Cade Klubnik. This team is something special. We are back watching this game. It feels like I'm watching 2019, 2018. This is a great team, a team that's going to have a lot of success. I am super excited for the potential. I said potential. I'm not saying it's done yet. Like, we could easily collapse. I'm an Eagles fan. Started 10-1 last year. Ended up blowing up. But so it could happen. Knock on wood, it doesn't. But I'm excited for the potential matchup of Clemson and Miami in the ACC Conference Championship game. That could be elite. That could be a great game. But we're going to have a dominating season. It's going to be fun watching. Can't wait to see that Stanford game next weekend. But with all that being said, that is going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Podcast. Thanks for making Clemson your first listen today. Now go check out Locked On College Football Podcasts, from NIL deals to the biggest games to recruiting. Spencer McCaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season. But make sure you're here every week after game day, as we will be doing these post-game episodes on Saturday. Sometimes it won't be right after game, but we will have an episode up every Saturday after game day for Clemson. We can't wait to have that next week. Make sure you join our insider program for Locked On Clemson. You can text Clemson 864-252-1907. You get a 14-day trial. You get to text with us during the game. So if you're not following over on Twitter, we have some even more reactions over on that insider program where we're texting with you about our reactions. You can respond back to us. We'll have a conversation about it throughout the entire game. It also gets you some mailbag episodes where you get to send in some questions and we just answer questions regarding it. And you also get bonus videos on other things as well. So join that insider program. Again, it's Clemson to 864-252-1907. Hey, if you haven't, make sure you're subscribed to this podcast, whether you're listening audio or on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. A review would go so far for us. If you're listening via audio, please give us a 5-star review. That goes so much farther than you think. And even if you write a review down below, a written review goes so far. So that would be very appreciative to us and would help us out a lot. But that is going to do it for this episode. We can't wait to see you Monday as we start breaking down this game and looking forward to next week. Until then, keep that Tiger pride alive and roaring. And as always, go Tigers!